Morning everybody, Andy here down on the beach. Julie said I don't want to be in the video this morning. No, I'm still too sleepy. Anyway, at day 61, I should put the figures down below, and I can't remember what they are, unfortunately, because I haven't got my piece of paper with me. We just got up and thought, right, we're going to come out because it's quite nice. The timer's out, but it's coming in now. So anyway, I thought I'd just talk a little about the news, because the top story at the moment is about a man called Dominic Cummings, for those who aren't in the UK. Dominic Cummings, to be honest, I don't think anyone really knows what he does, because he's unelected. He's not gone through any sort of job interviews, selection processes. He hasn't been voted into his job, his office. He is just there as an advisor, a communications director. I'm not really sure. He's the man who makes up all the slogans, some of which are very ironic, especially the one that says stay at home and protect the NHS, save lives and all that, you know, stay alert, or get Brexit done. That's him. That's the man who comes up with all those snappy little slogans, and he's a very, very powerful man. What some would say he's even more powerful than Boris Johnson, because he's the man who tells Boris Johnson what he should be doing. But unfortunately, he's doing his own thing. He's coming up with these slogans like staying at home, but he's not actually following his own advice, like other people in governments in New Zealand and Scotland and elsewhere have been like as well, and have been caught out. He's been caught out by driving 250 miles to his parents in Durham, supposedly, I think, to drop off his children for childcare, because he was going to come down, or was in the process of, him and his wife, of coming down with COVID-19 a month or so ago, about the same sort of time as Boris Johnson had it. Obviously they were close together, so that's probably how they both got it, from one from the other. But he decided it was all right to do that, because apparently there's nobody in London that can provide childcare. That's and he's obviously got no friends who can help him out at all, and he's got no influence, you know, even though he's at the top of government in some way. God knows how much he gets paid, by the way. But even worse than that, so he's obviously not going to resign. Boris isn't going to sack him because he knows too much. This is a cynical point of view, but having been with Boris for a number of years through the whole Brexit campaign and the 3 or 4 years since then, and obviously what's going on now, and all the ins and outs of what was done, what hasn't been done, the lies, the innuendo, all this sort of stuff. He's even attended meetings of the infamous SAGE committee, which is the health committee which advises the government. He's got no background in that whatsoever, but he still goes to these sort of meetings. That's the sort of man he is, because of his sort of bombastic character. Very determined, very strange man who writes some very strange blog posts and things like that. And as I said, a man who no one really knows anything about. So he's not really going to get the sack. He's got to resign, but he's never going to resign. You know, something very, very bad is going to have to come out for him to actually leave office, in inverted commas, because yes, well, you know, as I said, he's not been elected, he's not been voted in to do anything. But it turns out now that he might not have done this trip to Durham once. He might have done it more than once, even multiple times, which does make you wonder, you know, where are we? And there's a slogan or a saying somewhere that he who writes the news controls history, and he's the sort of man who's writing the news. He's been writing the news in lots of ways for 3 or 4 years now, with the whole Brexit campaign. Whichever side of the fence you're on, he was very, very influential on the slogans on buses, and as I said, the slogans themselves about get Brexit done, etc, etc. So he's a very, very influential man, and he is writing history, and he's being allowed to write history, even though he's never been elected into office in any way. And it sort of made me wonder really about news generally, how we consume news, and obviously the way we consume news now has changed so much. Back in the day, we used to read newspapers. That was the way. You got your newspaper in the morning, it might have dropped on the mat in your door, you know, the paper boy or whatever delivered it, or threw it at your door, as they do in America. But that was the first time you'd heard the news. You read that, you got to open the paper and wow, that's happened. Now of course that isn't the case anymore, and you can manipulate news in so many ways. You know, Donald's always going on with Donald Trump's always going on about fake news and all this sort of stuff, trying to control the media. That's what these people do with Facebook, Cambridge Analytics, and all those sort of things that have gone on. All the underhand ways. It's probably happened before, but in different ways. But funny enough, we watched a couple of films recently. One called, what was it called? The Post, all about the Washington Post. Great film actually, with Tom Hanks as Ben Bradley, the editor of the Washington Post, and Meryl Streep as like the owner publisher. And it was all to do with a series of Pentagon papers and about going back through history with various presidents. Johnson, I think Nixon was involved, certainly John F. Kennedy was involved, and telling secrets about that. And the only way that people found out about this is when they picked their papers up. They were publishing the news, they were making the news by putting these things out. And ironically, the last scene in that particular film was the break-in at the Watergate building in Washington. And so of course we watched All the President's Men, but it showed you how influential newspapers were, how important newspapers were, and how we got our news back in those days, in the sort of late 60s, in the 70s. They, you know, people were picking, that was the first they ever heard of it. Obviously it was then picked up by TV news. The whole thing's changed. So when you've got someone like a Dominic Cummings in office now, they are controlling the news, they are making the news, they are influencing the news, and this is an unelected official who's basically doing what he likes. So, you know, now everyone's going to think, well, if he can go and see his mother 250 miles away, sod it, I'm going to go and see mine. Why should I bother when he doesn't have to? And that is one of the problems with a lot of these people. As I said, other politicians in other countries have been caught out and they've resigned. We had the health official here who resigned for doing something very similar, having his mistress come to his house a couple of times. It's not a great deal of difference. They're still breaking the lockdown rules that Dominic Cummings probably helped to write, certainly helped to write the slogans. So it's the double standards. I hate all that sort of stuff, the sort of basic sort of corruption and the way that certain people feel that they can get away with whatever they like. And I've said several times in this video, and said the other day, that we all need to be able to look ourselves in the mirror at the end of this and say, we did the right thing, we did what was asked of us, and we tried to protect lives, we tried to protect the NHS, and we tried to protect those around us. And it's very unfortunate that people in influence, in power, who decide they're not going to do that, get away with it. Anyway, stay strong, stay safe, and hopefully I shall speak to you tomorrow. Goodbye.